The massive chamber stretched for miles in every direction. Crystal walls reached toward a ceiling that seemed to touch the stars themselves. 12 enormous thrones sat in a perfect circle, each one holding a different alien being. The air felt heavy with the weight of thousands of years of power and control. Jake Morrison stood alone in the center of the circle. His simple black suit looked plain next to the golden robes and shining armor of the beings around him. He was a tall man, with gray hair and tired eyes. Deep lines on his face showed he had seen many hard things in his 50 years of life. His hands stayed calm at his sides even though he knew his next words would change everything. The speaker for the Galactic Council rose from her throne. Velthera was a Zephyrian, made of living crystal that caught the light and threw rainbows across the floor. Her voice rang like bells when she spoke, but there was no music in her words. "Human Morrison," she said, and the word human sounded like something dirty in her mouth. "You stand before the council that has ruled this galaxy for 3,000 years. 12 great races have brought peace and order to countless worlds. We have decided the fate of your species." Jake said nothing. He had learned long ago that the best way to deal with bullies was to let them talk first. The council loved to hear their own voices. Another council member stood. Admiral Krextor was a Thoraxian, 8 feet tall and covered in scales that looked like black metal. His yellow eyes glowed as he spoke. "Your species has broken our laws. You spread to new worlds without asking. You trade with races we have forbidden. You treat all beings as equals when the natural order clearly shows some are meant to rule and others to serve. Your crimes are clear," added Velthera. "Humanity refuses to know its place. You are young, barely 300 years in space. You have no great technology, no powerful weapons, no ancient wisdom. Yet you act as if you have the right to decide your own future." A third being spoke. She looked like a giant insect with 4 arms and green skin that seemed to move on its own. "The Velkari have studied your species carefully. You are dangerous. You change too quickly. You do not respect the old ways. Other young races learn to obey. You do not." Jake felt a small smile touch his lips. These aliens thought change was a bad thing. They had ruled the galaxy so long they forgot how to grow. They were like old trees that looked strong, but would break in the first real storm. "We offer you a choice," Velthera continued. "A choice no other race has been given. You may surrender now and accept our protection. You will move your people to worlds we will give you. You will follow our laws. You will stop spreading to new places. You will serve the greater good of the galaxy, as we define it. Or," Jake asked quietly. The crystal being's light grew brighter. "Or we will remove your species from existence. We have done this before to races that could not learn their place. We do not wish to destroy you, but we will if we must." The chamber fell silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Back on Earth, billions of people waited for his answer. They trusted him to find a way to save them. They believed he could make a deal, find some middle ground, buy them time. But Jake had been a soldier before he became a diplomat. He had fought in 3 wars and led men into battles where the odds said they should all die. He knew something these ancient beings had forgotten. Sometimes the only way to win was to refuse to lose. "I need to understand," Jake said slowly. "You want us to give up our freedom. Move to planets you choose. Follow laws we had no part in making. Stop exploring, stop growing, stop being human. You will be safe," Krextor said. "You will live. Your children will live. You will have peace." "Whose peace?" Jake asked. "Peace where we cannot choose our own path? Peace where we bow to masters we never elected? Peace where our children will never see a new star because you decide which stars belong to humans?" "Peace where you survive," Velthera said. And now, there was anger in her bell-like voice. "We have been patient with your species longer than any other. Do not mistake our mercy for weakness." Jake looked around the circle. 12 races that had ruled for so long they thought rule was their right. Being so powerful they had forgotten what it felt like to fight for something that mattered. They saw humans as children who needed to be controlled or put down. They were wrong. I have a message from the President of Earth, the colonies, and all free human worlds, Jake said. His voice stayed level, but it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. She asked me to thank you for making our choice easy. The council members leaned forward. This was not what they expected to hear. Jake straightened his shoulders. When he spoke again, his voice was the voice of a soldier giving orders, not a diplomat asking for favors. The human race has considered your offer. We reject it completely. We will not surrender our freedom. We will not abandon our colonies. We will not bow to tyrants, no matter how old or powerful they think they are. Then you choose death, Belthara said. Jake shook his head. No. We choose war. The words hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several council members actually stepped back. In 3,000 years, no species had ever chosen to fight the council. Every race either surrendered or tried to run. None had ever looked at the greatest military force in the galaxy and said they would rather fight than submit. You are fools, Krextor snarled. You have 300 ships. We have 30,000. You have no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no technology that can match ours. You will be destroyed in weeks. Maybe, Jake said, but we will be free when we die. Can you say the same? He turned and walked toward the chamber doors. Behind him, the council exploded into angry voices. Threats followed him across the crystal floor. Promises of destruction, warnings of the pain to come, reminders of their power. Jake Morrison did not look back. He had delivered his message. Now the real work would begin. As the doors closed behind him, he heard Velthara's voice ring out one last time. So be it, human. You have chosen your fate. We will show the galaxy what happens to those who defy the natural order. Jake smiled as he walked to his ship. These aliens thought they knew what humans were capable of. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The council chamber buzzed with laughter after the human left. Admiral Krextor's scales rattled as he shook with amusement. Did you hear that little creature? He thinks his people can fight us. Velthara's crystal form sparkled as she shared the joke. 300 years in space and they think they understand war. We have crushed empires that ruled for millennia before humans learned to make fire. How long should we give them to change their minds? Asked the Velkari trademaster, her insect-like head tilting to one side. Surely when they see our fleets gathering, they will come crawling back to beg for the deal we offered. No. Krextor said, his voice hard as stone. They chose war. We will give them war. But first, let them see what they face. The war planning began immediately. The 12 council races had not fought a real war in over 1,000 years. The last few species that defied them had been dealt with quickly and quietly. But the council members remembered the old ways. They pulled out ancient star charts and began dividing human space among themselves. The Earth system will make a fine trophy, said the Hydraxian fleet commander, a being that looked like living water held in a clear shell. I think it will serve well as a museum world to show future species what happens to rebels. The outer colonies have good mining worlds, added the Velkari. My people will put them to proper use once the humans are removed. They spent days planning their victory celebration. Art treasures from human worlds would fill council museums. Human technology, primitive as it was, might provide some amusing historical pieces. They debated whether to keep any humans alive as specimens or simply erase the species completely. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison's ship raced back toward Earth. Every minute counted now. The council would need time to gather their scattered fleets, but that time would not last long. Maybe 6 months if humanity was lucky. On Earth, President Kate Sullivan stood in the war room deep beneath the Capitol. Maps and screens covered every wall, showing human colonies scattered across 50 star systems. 300 ships were all they had against the greatest military force in galactic history. Tell me we have a plan, she said to the assembled military leaders. General Ben Carter stepped forward. He was a short man with steel-gray hair and hands scarred from years of combat engineering. We have several plans, Madam President. None of them are good. The enemy has us outgunned, outmanned, and out-teched, added Admiral Lisa Torres. She was younger than the others, but her dark eyes held the sharpness of someone who had never lost a space battle. Our biggest advantage is that they think, this will be easy. Kate studied the star charts. Red dots showed Council fleet positions. Blue dots showed human colonies. The red dots outnumbered the blue ones by huge amounts. What do you recommend? We run, Carter said bluntly. We evacuate what people we can and scatter to the far edges of the galaxy. Maybe some of us survive. No, Torres said firmly. We fight, but not the way they expect. Explain, Kate ordered. Torres walked to the main display and began highlighting star systems. The Council has fought the same way for thousands of years. Big fleets, direct attacks, overwhelming force. They think war is about having the biggest guns and the most ships. Isn't it? Carter asked. Sometimes. But humans have been fighting each other for our entire history. We know things about war that these aliens forgot long ago. Torres's fingers danced over the controls, showing battle plans that looked nothing like traditional space combat. Guerrilla warfare, she continued. Hit-and-run attacks. Never fight fair. Never give them a target they can hit back. Make them afraid to send small groups, but make big groups too slow to catch us. Kate nodded slowly. You want to turn their size against them? Exactly. And there's something else. Torres smiled grimly. The Council rules through fear. They keep hundreds of species in line by showing them what happens to rebels. But what if the rebels win? General Carter leaned forward. You think other species will join us? I think other species are waiting to see if someone can actually hurt the Council. We just need to prove it's possible. The meeting lasted 12 hours. When it ended, humanity had a plan. It was desperate, dangerous, and depended on things going exactly right. But it was better than surrender, across human space. The preparations began. Colony worlds started building hidden defenses. Merchant ships were quietly armed and given new orders. Volunteer crews began training for missions that had no hope of return. On the frontier world of New Texas, Sheriff Roy Mason read the emergency orders that had just arrived. He was an old man who had fought in the last human war 20 years. Ego. Now it looked like he would fight in another one. Helen, he called to the mayor. Better call a town meeting. Looks like we're going to have some uninvited guests soon. Mayor Helen Parker was a tough woman who had helped settle New Texas when it was just empty land under alien stars. She read the orders twice before she believed them. The Galactic Council is coming here? First stop on their way to Earth, according to this. They figure a farming colony will be easy to take. Good place to make an example. Helen laughed, but there was no humor in it. They don't know much about farmers, do they? Nope, especially not human farmers. While the humans prepared for war, Council fleets began moving toward human space. Admiral Krexter commanded the largest force, over 5,000 ships that could destroy planets. He had fought in the last real war 800 years ago and looked forward to battle again. How long since the humans have faced real military force? He asked his aide. They fight among themselves regularly, sir, but nothing like our technology level. Perfect. This will be good training for our younger officers. They need to see real combat before they get soft. The other Council races were just as confident. The Velkari trade fleets had been converted to carry troops and supplies. The Crystal Zephyrians prepared their energy weapons. Ancient war machines that had not moved in centuries began powering up across the galaxy. But as the great fleets gathered, smaller ships moved in the darkness, between stars. Human scout vessels watched and reported. They saw the awesome power preparing to crush their species, but they also saw something else. The Council fleets were magnificent, but they moved like a parade. No scouts ahead, no guards on the flanks, no one watching for traps. They had been so powerful for so long that they had forgotten enemies might actually fight back. Admiral Torres received the scout reports in her hidden command center. The main Council fleet would reach human space in 4 months. Advance forces would arrive much sooner. Send the message to all commands, she ordered. Phase 1 begins now. Let's show them what humans can do. In the depths of space, human ships began moving toward their targets. They were smaller, slower, and weaker than the enemy, But they carried something the Council had not seen in 1,000 years. They carried the fury of a free people who refused to bow. Commander Thys guided his crystal ship toward the small blue world the humans called New Texas. Behind him, 50 vessels of the Zephyrian advance fleet followed in perfect formation. The planet looked peaceful in the starlight, with green fields and small cities scattered across 3 continents. No orbital defenses detected, reported his sensor officer. No military vessels in the system. Population approximately 50,000 humans, mostly engaged in agriculture. Thys felt disappointment flow through his crystalline body. He had hoped for at least some resistance to make this interesting. The humans had declared war on the entire Galactic Council, but their first colony was not even defended. "Open communications with the planet," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing a human male in simple clothes sitting behind a wooden desk. The man had gray hair and calm eyes. A metal star was pinned to his shirt. "This is Sheriff Roy Mason of New Texas. What can I do for you folks?" Thys blinked his light-based eyes. The human spoke as if alien warships appeared in his system every day. "I am Commander Thys of the Galactic Council Fleet. You will surrender this world immediately and prepare your population for relocation." Roy leaned back in his chair. "Well, now that's not going to work for us. We like it here just fine. How about you turn those ships around and head back where you came from? You refuse to surrender?" Thys could not hide his surprise. Even species with powerful militaries usually tried to negotiate when faced with Council forces. "That's right. This is our home and we're staying." "Then you will be removed by force." Roy nodded slowly. "I figured you might say that. In that case, Commander, you and your people are not welcome on New Texas. I'm ordering you to leave our space immediately." Thys almost laughed. One human sheriff ordering a Council fleet to retreat. It would make an amusing story to tell other commanders. "You have 1 hour to reconsider. After that, we will land troops and take control of your world." The communication ended. Thys turned to his officers. "Begin landing operations. Use minimum force. I want the humans alive to serve as examples to other worlds." An hour later, the first Zephyrian dropships descended toward New Texas. The planet still showed no signs of military activity. No fighters rose to meet them. No ground-based weapons fired at the approaching ships. It seemed the humans had accepted their fate. The dropships landed in fields outside the main settlement. Crystal-armored soldiers emerged, their energy weapons ready. Major Kellax, Thys's ground commander, led 200 troops toward the human town. The settlement looked like something from an ancient historical display. Simple buildings lined dirt roads. Humans walked around doing daily tasks as if an alien invasion was nothing special. Children played in yards while their parents tended gardens. "Attention, humans," Kellax announced through his suit's speakers. "By order of the Galactic Council, this world is now under our protection. Gather in the central square for processing." A few humans looked up at the announcement, but most ignored it completely. Kellax felt his temper rise. These primitive beings should be cowering in fear, not acting like he was unimportant. "I said gather in the square. Now." A human woman approached him. She was middle-aged with brown hair and wore simple farming clothes. "You must be the fellow Roy was expecting. I'm Mayor Helen Parker. I'm afraid we're going to have to ask you to leave." "I am Major Kellax of the Galactic Council Forces. You will comply with our orders or face consequences." Helen smiled. "Well, Major, I suppose we'll face the consequences then." That was when Kellax noticed the street was empty. All the humans had disappeared while he was talking to the mayor. Even the woman in front of him was backing away. "Where did they go?" he demanded. "Somewhere safe," Helen said and dove behind a nearby building. The first explosion came from behind the Zephyrian force. A massive blast sent 3 soldiers flying through the air. Then the hidden guns opened fire. What Kellax had thought were simple farm buildings revealed themselves as camouflaged bunkers. Weapons that looked crude but hit like hammers tore through crystal armor. Human voices shouted orders from hidden positions as his soldiers tried to find enemies they could not see. Amy Foster crouched in a tunnel that ran beneath the main street. She had been a demolitions expert in the human military before becoming a farmer. Now she was both again. Her team had spent 3 months preparing new Texas for this day. Team 2, hit the dropships. She whispered into her radio. Don't let them call for help. Above her, alien soldiers ran in panic as explosions erupted around them. The Zephyrians had energy shields that stopped most weapons, but human engineers had studied Council technology for months. They knew exactly where the weak points were. "Grenade out," called Pete Johnson from the next tunnel. He had been a mechanic before the war. Now he lobbed homemade explosives with the skill of long practice. The Zephyrian forces tried to form defensive lines, but there was nothing to defend against. The humans were everywhere and nowhere. They appeared from hidden tunnels, fired devastating attacks, and vanished again before return fire could find them. Major Kellax screamed orders at his remaining troops. Half his force was down, and he still could not locate the main human force. How could primitive beings fight like this? "Sir," his communication officer called. "The dropships, they're under attack." Kellax turned to see pillars of smoke rising from the landing zone. The human farmers had somehow destroyed his transport and communication vessels. His force was stranded on this nightmare world. Amy Foster climbed out of her tunnel as the last alien soldier fell. Around her, other humans emerged from their hiding places. They moved with the calm efficiency of people who had fought together for years. "Casualties?" she asked. "2 wounded, none dead," reported Sam Mitchell, who had been a combat medic. "The aliens hit hard, but they didn't know how to fight dirty." "Good. Strip their equipment and vehicles. Command wants to study everything." As the humans collected alien technology, more explosions echoed from orbit. The ships in space were discovering that New Texas had more surprises waiting. Commander Thiss stared at his displays in disbelief. His ground force was gone, completely destroyed by what his intelligence said was a farming colony. Even worse, something was attacking his ships. "Where are those explosions coming from?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. We're detecting no enemy vessels. But something is hitting our outer ships with kinetic projectiles." "Kinetic projectiles? You mean solid metal?" "Yes, sir. High-velocity impacts that are punching right through our shields." Thace could not understand it. Energy shields stopped energy weapons perfectly. They had made space combat predictable and safe for centuries. But these human weapons were just chunks of metal moving very fast, and the shields barely slowed them down. "Sir, we're receiving a communication from the planet." Sheriff Roy Mason appeared on the screen again. He looked exactly the same as before, still sitting behind his wooden desk. "Commander Thiss, I believe you wanted to reconsider your position." "You destroyed my landing force," Thiss said, his crystal voice cracking with shock. "They were trespassing. We asked them nicely to leave. You killed 200 Galactic Council soldiers." Roy shrugged. "They should have listened the first time. Now I'm going to ask you again, leave our space." "This is impossible. You are a primitive species with no advanced technology." "Commander, let me explain something to you. We've been fighting wars since before your people discovered fire. We know things about combat that you folks forgot a long time ago. You want to fight fair and follow rules. We want to win." Another explosion rocked Theis's flagship. His communication officer reported 3 more ships destroyed by the invisible human weapons. "If you value the lives of your remaining crews," Roy continued, "you'll jump out of this system in the next 10 minutes, because in 11 minutes, we're going to stop playing nice." Theis looked around his bridge. His officers stared at the displays showing their losses. In one day, a farming colony had destroyed a quarter of his force and made him look like a fool. "Sir," his navigation officer whispered, "perhaps we should regroup and call for reinforcements." Theis felt something he had not experienced in 800 years of service. Fear. Not just of the human weapons, but of what his superiors would say when they learned he had been defeated by farmers. "Prepare for jump," he ordered quietly. "Sir, prepare for jump. We are withdrawing from this system." On New Texas, humans watched as the alien ships vanished into hyperspace. They had won their first battle against the Galactic Council, but everyone knew this was just the beginning. Amy Foster stood in the smoking ruins of the alien landing zone. In her hand she held a piece of crystal armor that had belonged to a Zephyrian soldier. It was beautiful and sophisticated, but it had not saved its owner. "Think they'll come back?" asked Pete Johnson. Amy smiled grimly. "Oh, they'll be back, and they'll bring friends. But next time they won't think we're just simple farmers." "What are we then?" "We're humans, and we just taught the galaxy what that means." 6 months after the disaster at New Texas, the Galactic Council faced a reality they had never imagined. Their mighty fleets were losing a war against 300 human ships. Admiral Krextor stood in his command center, staring at reports that made no sense. The massive display showed the galaxy, with red dots marking council losses and blue dots showing human victories. There were far too many blue dots. "Explain this to me again," he growled at his intelligence officer. "How did we lose the entire Rigel system?" The officer, a nervous Velkari with twitching antennae, consulted his data pad. "The humans used what they call a pincer movement, sir. 2 small fleets attacked our supply lines while a third hit our main base when we moved ships to protect the convoys. We had 60 ships in that system. They had 12. "Yes, sir. But they moved faster, hit harder, and seemed to know exactly where we would be." Krextor slammed his scaled fist on the control panel. "This is impossible. We are the greatest military force in galactic history. How are these primitives defeating us?" The truth was that humans fought like no one the Council had ever faced. For 3,000 years, galactic warfare had followed set patterns. Large fleets met in open space. The side with better technology and more ships won. Defeated enemies surrendered and accepted Council rule. Humans ignored all the rules. Captain Scott Turner commanded the human destroyer USS Independence as it slipped through an asteroid field deep in Council space. His ship was small and fast, designed for hit-and-run attacks rather than direct combat. Behind him, 3 Council patrol vessels hunted for his ship. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported his sensor officer, Lieutenant Danny Ross. "Looks like a Hydraxian cruiser, heavy weapons and shields." Scott smiled. The aliens had good sensors and powerful weapons, but they thought like the military manuals taught them. They expected enemies to either run away or stand and fight. They never expected what humans actually did. "Take us into the asteroid cluster," he ordered. "Make it look like we're trying to hide." The Independence dove into the swirling rocks, its hull scraping past boulders the size of buildings. The Council ships followed, confident they had cornered their prey. What they did not know was that Scott had been through this asteroid field 6 times in the past month. His crew had mapped every rock, every passage, every hiding spot. They knew exactly where they were going. "Now," Scott whispered. The Independence suddenly reversed course, diving straight back toward the pursuing ships. The alien captains had seconds to react before the human destroyer opened fire at point-blank range. Human weapons were different from Council weapons. They did not use energy beams or plasma charges. They fired solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds. The aliens' energy shields, designed to stop energy weapons, barely slowed the kinetic rounds. The first Hydraxian cruiser shuddered as metal slugs punched through its hull. Atmosphere vented into space as critical systems failed. The ship tried to turn away, but Scott's gunners were already targeting the second vessel. "Direct hits on both targets," Ross reported. "The third ship is trying to run." "Let it go," Scott said. "We want survivors to spread the word." As the Independence slipped away into hyperspace, the surviving Council ship sent desperate reports back to fleet headquarters. Another human victory. Another example of tactics that made no sense to alien minds. The same pattern was repeating across the galaxy. Human ships appeared where they should not be, attacked targets that seemed impossible to reach, and vanished before Council forces could respond. They fought with weapons that ignored advanced defenses and used strategies that broke every rule of civilized warfare. But the real shock for the Council came when other species began to rebel. Colonel Rachel Stone led her battalion through the jungle of Kepler 4, a world the Council had ruled for 800 years. The native Keplites were a peaceful species that had never resisted Council control. Until now. Human Colonel, whispered Techlore, the Keplite leader walking beside her. My people are ready. When do we strike? Rachel checked her watch. In 30 minutes, human ships would attack the orbital stations. That was the signal for the ground assault on the Council garrison. Your people understand they don't have to do this? She asked. We can handle the garrison ourselves. Techlore's large eyes glowed with anger that had been building for centuries. The Council took our children to work in their mines. They stole our food to feed their armies. They told us we were too weak to govern ourselves. We understand very well, Human Colonel. The attack began exactly on schedule. Human fighters swept down from orbit, destroying Council communication arrays with precision strikes. On the ground, Rachel's soldiers moved through the jungle like ghosts, taking out guard posts and sensor stations. But it was the Keplites who stunned everyone. For 800 years they had been model subjects, quiet and obedient. The Council. Garrison had grown lazy, thinking these peaceful beings would never cause trouble. They were wrong. Techlore led 3,000 Keplite warriors in an assault that overwhelmed the Council base in minutes. Centuries of anger exploded in a fury that shocked even the human soldiers. The Keplites fought with desperate courage, knowing this was their only chance for freedom. When the battle ended, Kepler-4 was free. More importantly, news of the victory spread to other oppressed worlds. If the peaceful Keplites could defeat the Council, anyone could. Across the galaxy, rebellion began to spread like fire. Species that had accepted Council rule for centuries suddenly found the courage to fight. They saw that the mighty Council could bleed, could lose, could be beaten. Admiral Torres watched the tactical displays from her hidden command center. Blue dots now covered half the galaxy as human forces and their new allies struck at Council positions. The impossible was happening. Humanity was winning. Ma'am, reported Captain Johnson, her intelligence chief. We're getting surrender requests from 15 more Council outposts. They say they want to join the Alliance. Screen them carefully, Torres ordered. Make sure it's not a trick, but if they're genuine, welcome them aboard. The greatest victory came at the Battle of Vega Station. Admiral Krextor had assembled the largest Council fleet in 1,000 years. Over 8,000 ships gathered to crush the human rebellion once and for all. He chose Vega as the place to make his stand because the system had narrow hyperspace lanes that would force the humans to attack in small groups. It was exactly the kind of thinking that had lost him every battle so far. Torres brought her entire fleet to Vega, all 300 human ships plus 2,000 vessels from allied species. The Council forces outnumbered them 3-1, but Torres had studied ancient Earth naval battles. She knew how to turn an enemy's size against them. All ships, begin attack pattern Thermopylae, she broadcast on the command channel. The human fleet did not attack the Council forces directly. Instead, they positioned themselves in the narrow hyperspace lanes and waited. When Krextor's massive fleet tried to advance, they found themselves trapped in a bottleneck, with human ships controlling the exit. The first Council ships to enter the lane came under devastating fire from multiple directions. They could not maneuver in the narrow space, and their return fire hit their own ships as much as human vessels. The more ships Krextor sent in, the worse the traffic jam became. Sir, his communication officer called out in panic. The front elements are reporting massive casualties. They're requesting permission to withdraw. No, Krextor roared. Push through. We outnumber them. But numbers meant nothing in the narrow space. Human ships darted in and out of the lane like ancient cavalry, striking fast and hard before vanishing again. Council ships collided with each other as they tried to turn in spaces too small for their massive hulls. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the mighty Council fleet was scattered and broken. Krextor's flagship limped away with half its weapons destroyed and its crew demoralized. Torres surveyed the battlefield from her command ship. Hundreds of Council vessels drifted powerless in space. Their crews were already sending surrender signals. Ma'am, her communication officer reported, we're receiving a message from Admiral Krextor. He's requesting terms for surrender. Torres smiled. 6 months ago, these aliens had thought humans were too primitive to matter. Now their greatest military leader was asking for mercy. "Tell him we'll discuss terms," she said. "But first he needs to understand something. This war isn't about conquest, it's about freedom. And freedom isn't something we give to people, it's something people take for themselves." Across the galaxy, the news of Vega spread like lightning. The Galactic Council's main fleet had been defeated by the species they called primitive. Ancient empires that had bowed to Council rule for millennia began to reconsider their positions. In the Council chambers, Velthara stared at reports that seemed impossible. Half their territory was in rebellion. Their greatest fleet was destroyed. Species they had ruled for centuries were declaring independence. "How did this happen?" she asked the assembled council members. "6 months ago we were masters of the galaxy. Now we are losing everything to one young species." "They fight without honor," complained the Velkari representative. "They use tactics that are against all civilized warfare." "They do not care about our rules," added another council member. They 1 year after Jake Morrison had declared war on the Galactic Council, he stood in the same crystal chamber where it all began. But everything had changed. Human guards stood at the doors. Allied species representatives filled the gallery. The 12 ancient thrones of the council members were empty except for 3, the survivors of humanity's war for freedom. Velthara, the crystal Zephyrian, who had once spoken with absolute authority, now sat in chains made of the same energy-dampening metal humans used in their weapons. Her crystal form was dim, almost gray. Beside her sat Admiral Krextor, his scales scarred from the Battle of Vega, and Trademaster Vixara of the Velkari, her insect-like form hunched in defeat. Jake walked slowly around the 3 prisoners. He wore the same simple black suit he had worn a year ago, but now a small pin on his lapel showed the symbol of the new Galactic Federation, a circle of stars representing all species as equals. "You expected to be here today," he said quietly, "but you thought you would be the judges, not the accused." Velthara's voice was barely a whisper. "Get it over with, human. Execute us and claim your victory." Jake stopped walking and looked at her with something like sadness. "Is that what you think this was about? Revenge? Conquest?" "It is what we would have done," Krextor admitted, his proud voice now broken. "We would have destroyed your species completely, made an example that would last for thousands of years." "I know," Jake said. "That's exactly why we fought you." He turned to address the gallery filled with representatives from hundreds of species. Some had been council allies who surrendered when they saw which way the war was going. Others were former slaves who had joined the human rebellion. All of them watched to see what humanity would do with absolute power. "A year ago, these 3 beings offered humanity a choice," Jake announced. "Surrender our freedom or face extermination. We chose a third option. We chose to fight for something better than what existed." General Ben Carter stood near the main entrance, his weathered face showing the strain of the past year. He had commanded ground forces in dozens of battles, seeing good soldiers die to free worlds that had been enslaved for centuries. Part of him wanted to see the council leaders pay for their crimes, but he also knew what Jake was going to say next. "The old Galactic Council is ended," Jake continued. "Their empire is broken, their fleets are scattered, their subjects are free. The question now is what comes next." President Kate Sullivan rose from her seat in the gallery. The past year had aged her considerably, but her voice was still strong. "Ambassador Morrison speaks for all of humanity when he says that we did not fight this war to become new tyrants. We fought to prove that freedom is possible." Velthara looked up sharply. "You mean to let us live?" "We mean to do more than that," Jake said. "We mean to offer you what you never offered anyone else. A choice." He gestured to an aide, who brought forward a simple document. "The Charter of the New Galactic Federation. Every species that signs it agrees to 3 basic principles. First, all species are equal regardless of age, technology, or military power. Second, no species has the right to rule another. Third, conflicts will be resolved through discussion and vote, not force." Jake placed the document on a table in front of the three prisoners. You can sign this and join the Federation as equal members. Your people will be free to govern themselves under Federation law. You will have votes in the new Congress, voices in our councils, rights and protections under our Constitution. Or, Krexter asked, or you refuse and your species remain outside the Federation. We will not attack you or force you to join, but you will also not be allowed to attack or enslave others. If you choose the old ways, you choose them alone. Pure. Chamber fell silent. This was not what anyone had expected. In 3,000 years of galactic history, the victors in a war always dictated terms to the defeated. They took territory, demanded tribute, imposed their will on the conquered. Humans were offering their enemies a voice in government. Admiral Torres entered the chamber and approached Jake. The past year had made her a legend throughout the galaxy, the human admiral who had defeated the Council's greatest fleet. But she looked tired, as if the weight of victory was heavier than the burden of fighting. The fleet reports are in, she said quietly. The last Council holdouts have surrendered. All systems are secure, Jake nodded. Casualties? 8,000 human dead, 22,000 wounded. Allied losses were much higher. Torres paused. Sir, we won. It's really over. The fighting is over, Jake corrected. The hard part starts now. He turned back to the three council leaders. What happened here proves something important. No, empire lasts forever. No rule is permanent. Eventually, every tyrant falls and every slave becomes free. The only question is whether that change comes through war or through wisdom. Velthara studied the document before her. You would really treat us as equals? After everything we did? After everything you tried to do, Jake corrected. The difference matters. You threatened to destroy humanity, but we stopped you. You wanted to enslave the galaxy, but we freed it. Your intentions were evil, but your actual crimes can be forgiven. Why? Vixara asked, speaking for the first time. Why show mercy to enemies who would have shown you none? Jake smiled sadly. Because that's what makes us different from you. You ruled through fear. We want to lead through hope. You saw other species as either servants or enemies. We see them as potential friends. He gestured around the chamber. Look at what we've built in just 1 year. Keplites working with Thraxians, Zephyrians and Hydraxians serving on the same ships. Former enemies becoming allies because they discovered they wanted the same thing, freedom to choose their own path. Colonel Stone entered from a side door, her uniform dusty from recent fighting on the outer rim. She had spent the last month helping newly liberated worlds establish their own governments. The work was exhausting but rewarding. The last liberation mission is complete, she reported. Zarian 7 is free and has requested Federation membership. That makes 412 worlds that have chosen to join us. Jake felt a surge of pride. 412 worlds where beings could now choose their own leaders, follow their own customs, dream their own dreams. It was what the war had been fought for. Will you join them? He asked the three council leaders. Velthara looked at her fellow prisoners. Krextor nodded slowly. Vixara's compound eyes showed something that might have been hope. If we sign, Velthara said, what guarantee do we have that you will not simply become new council members? What stops humans from ruling as we did? Nothing, Jake admitted, except our own choice to be better, and your choice to hold us accountable. He leaned forward. That's the point of the Federation. No one species has enough votes to control the others. Every important decision requires cooperation between different peoples. If humans ever try to become tyrants, you and 600 other species can vote us down. You would give up that much power? Krextor asked in disbelief. We never wanted power over others, Jake replied. We wanted the power to control our own lives. There's a difference. The three council leaders looked at each other, communicating in ways humans could not understand. Finally, Velthara reached for the document. I will sign, she said quietly. My people are tired of war. Perhaps it is time to try this human idea of peace. Krextor followed, his massive claws carefully signing his name. The Thoraxians choose to join this federation. We will see if your way works better than ours. Vixara was the last to sign. The Velkari accept these terms. We choose to trust human mercy over our own pride. Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The war was truly over. The galaxy had chosen peace over conquest, cooperation over domination, hope over fear. Then let me be the first to welcome you as founding members of the Galactic Federation, he said formally. May we build something together that none of us could achieve alone. As the former council leaders were escorted away to comfortable quarters rather than prison cells, Jake stood alone in the crystal chamber. A year ago, he had walked into this room as humanity's representative. Today, he was the elected Secretary General of a federation that spanned half the galaxy. Admiral Torres joined him as the chamber emptied. Think it will work? She asked. It has to, Jake replied. Because the alternative is what we just fought, a war to prevent. And if some species decide they don't want to cooperate, if they try to rebuild the old empire, Jake smiled. Then we remind them that freedom is not just an idea. It's a choice that free people will fight to protect. We proved that once. We can prove it again if we have to. Outside the chamber, ships from 100 different worlds waited in orbit. Former enemies worked side by side on Federation vessels. Species that had been strangers were becoming friends. The galaxy was learning a new way to live. It would not be easy. There would be disputes and conflicts in times when cooperation seemed impossible. But for the first time in 3,000 years, beings across the galaxy could look up at the stars and know they were free to choose their own destiny. Jake Morrison walked out of the crystal chamber where he had once declared war on tyranny. Behind him, the empty thrones of the Galactic Council stood silent. Ahead of him lay the hard work of building a better future.